In 2015, Hilary Beaumont, reporter for Vice, traveled to Neskantaga to report its clean water problem. Neskantaga is a remote Oji-Crisis First Nation 500 kilometers northeast from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and sites close to 281 square kilometers of water. The community has been under boil water advisory for over 20 years. 75% of its band members under the age of 30 has never known clean water.
At least, after 20 years, Neskantaga and 8 neighboring First Nations, known as the Mattawa First Nations, has come together in their fight for clean water. They all sit on North America's largest chromite deposit, called Ring of Fire, which is estimated to be worth tens of billions of dollars. A Toronto company has bought the full rights, but the Mattawa First Nations have to agree on the proposed mining before anything goes ahead. If it does, the profits would actually benefit the Neskantaga community. They would have access roads and a new water treatment plant, which is going to give them clean water for the first time in 2 decades. But whatever choice is made, it will impact their land forever.
This report, Hilary Beaumont helped delivering water bottles across the community. She firstly thought a family would be given 2 boxes or even 2 liters of water, but in fact they were given 2 water bottles. In the city, 1.5 liters of water is used per day per person when a family is supposed to bathe, cook, and drink with the same amount of water. It was in 1993 that Neskantaga's water plant opened, but it only lasted 2 years. It was then in 1995 that a boil water advisory was imposed after the water was tested positive because of high levels of chlorine and other chemicals like carcinogens.
Aboriginal Affairs may provide them $225,000 annually that goes toward the water treatment facilities, but it's not producing the water that it requires for their people. Also, the department has spent over $1 million to bring them bottled water. The plant was actually not designed to filter a high volume of water. Instead, it uses a sand filtration system that doesn't remove chemicals.
In 2014, Neskantaga fell from number 4 to number 15 on the federal government's water treatment priority list. In 2015, Neskantaga fell to number 19 and officials refused to tell Vice the reason.
I interviewed Derek Fox, a Mattawa Tribal Council member and a lawyer. He says that from a legal perspective, the fact that Neskantaga is under a boil water advisory for over 20 years has become a matter of human rights. If that kind of situation would have happened in a non-native community, there'd be an uproar, whereas it has almost become normal in their community.
It is crazy to think that in Canada, some remote communities do not have access to safe water.
Second, our basic right to life is dependent on our access to water that is safe to drink and air that is safe to breathe.
Too many indigenous communities in Canada face a water crisis, and so still in 2015.
Because these communities live in remote areas, they are marginalized and subordinate to discrimination.
Fifth, they are disadvantaged from a social, economic, and humanitarian point of view. The quality of their environment is low and sometimes dangerous.
Access to clean water is one of our most basic human needs. We rely on it for drinking, but also for other essential needs such as washing ourselves, our dishes, our clothes, or for cooking for our family.
Without water, we could be sick or even worse. It could even lead to death.
8. Most Canadians already have the privilege to have access to safe and clean water, but some communities still face daily challenges to have access to water of an acceptable quality for drinking and hygiene.
Canada is bound by 3 oceans and is home for nearly 20% of the world's fresh water, but yet we still do not have enforceable national drinking water standards.
From coast to coast, our drinking water is not equally protected, leaving communities under federal jurisdiction, in particular with almost no legal protection, a fact that Indigenous communities know only too well.
Now is the analysis and how a functionalist would interpret the issue and its effects. So by definition, functionalism is a dynamic system whose structures work altogether to reach an equilibrium. The fact that they don't have access to clean water, a fundamental need, shows clearly that Neskantaga isn't in a well-functioning community.
In Vice's report, Neskantaga and the neighboring communities demonstrate what Durkheim called a mechanical society. It is a reference to society in which people have their similarities but are still independent. In this case, the Mattawa First Nations all share a common ground. They are all located under Ring of Fire, for which they all negotiate, as a group, the terms and conditions for their forthcoming mining. On the other hand, Neskantaga is still independent from the group because they are the only ones that are still, after 20 years, under a boil water advisory, whereas the other communities are under water restriction.
Also, because the community is poor and isolated from the rest of the world, it can explain the ongoing suicidal crisis with 11 suicides in 2 years. As mentioned in the report, 50% of the 421 band members in the dry community abused prescription drugs. Those suicides indeed affect the Neskantaga community because they don't have much to entertain themselves with and feel like there will never be a clear solution for their problems of the clear unwillingness of the government.
Finally, according to Parsons' 4 functional comments, Agile, the functionality of Neskantaga's system is in fact failing. The A stands for adaptation, and in Neskantaga's case, it tried to adapt himself to the clean water crisis by providing bottled water, but it isn't enough. The G stands for goal attainment, and Neskantaga has at least established clear goals, which are to have access to clean water and have social assistance for their ongoing suicide crisis.
The I stands for integration, where the system has to preserve their solidarity, and in Neskantaga's case, they are indeed trying to stay united, but the ongoing societal crisis isn't helping. Finally, the L in Agile still stands for latency, to motivate the members of the community to find their way out. In the Neskantaga's community, some find a way to their troubles by simply leaving their home, when some of them just give up.
Conflict theory is a theoretical framework that views society in a struggle for scarce resources. In the Neskantaga community, water is a scarce resource which affects the lives of Neskantaga's inhabitants. According to Karl Marx, they would be the proletariat since they don't have much power and because they are controlled by the government, who is in fact the bourgeoisie.
In the documentary, we see how the government and powerful people promote their own self-interest by not addressing the problem. Even if the federal government talk much about how they will address the problem and how inhuman it is to live like those communities do, they don't do anything about it. It's been 30 years that these reserves are on boil water advisory, but still the government prefers to put its money elsewhere.
Power is the core of conflict theory, and it dictates who is going to have scarce resources or who will be able to promote its own self-interest. In this case, Neskantaga has no power and cannot do much to have their clean water back. They only need money to build proper filtration system, but power dictates society, and unfortunately, they don't possess it.
Another concept of the conflict theory is recognizing consciousness. The type of consciousness that applies to the Neskantaga community is the class consciousness. It is in the recognition of domination and oppression and the collective action required to address the problem. They know that they are oppressed by the government and big companies, and they stand together to solve the problem.
To sum up, conflict theory is the idea that society is grounded upon inequality and competition, and that is actually what is happening in those communities.